most of you in this room have no clue who we are, but my name is Helen Crenshaw, and this is Derby Pattengill. And we are representing 9th District PTA, which is the Parent Teacher Association. And we provide service, support, training, leadership, and guidance to over 359 unit PTAs, 17 councils, and serve over 70,000 members within San Diego and Imperial County. This district was organized in 1917 to advocate for all children and youth in San Diego and Imperial counties. And relevant to those of you in this room is that we are an all volunteer, nonpartisan advocacy organization that is a registered 501c3 nonprofit and part of the California State PTA and the National PTA, which has been advocating to improve the lives of all since 1897. So we are the largest child advocacy group in the nation. And Derby and I, as leaders in this organization, have experience kind of on all levels of volunteer organizations. And we have, unfortunately, a great deal of experience kind of balancing and sometimes managing the passions and the motivations of our members in order to kind of avoid conflict and disruptions. So we are frequently called upon after issues have developed to kind of come in and help them resolve issues, or we try to train ahead of time in order to prevent those situations from arising. And with a volunteer organization, I think you've all probably found that managing the passions and motivations of an all volunteer organization is super challenging. And it's probably why, is that better? Sorry, sir. We were asked to be here today. So in our experience, we've seen that there are some pretty simple tools that can provide a framework for encouraging healthy discussion, and how those same tools can hopefully mitigate negative conflict that can derail an organization from working towards their goals and mission. So that's kind of who we are and why we're here. And I'm sorry, I'm not used to holding a microphone. I'm not a good performer. So that is who we are. And we have some basic ground rules. One, please save your questions for the end. And I have brought note cards that I can pass out if anyone wants to write questions down as we're going. I want to kind of help us bring that in. Thank you. So, and when we get to that, please raise your hand and wait to be called upon. We'll take one speaker at a time because that provides kind of courtesy for everyone. So can we kind of agree on that? Okay. In the autism community, we wave our hands in a kind of acknowledgement instead of clapping, etc. So we can go to the next one. So kind of the group, well, that one. Group questions to consider. So how many of you thought that previous slide was stupid? Seriously, how many of you thought those basic ground rules were stupid because you're like, we're adults, we behave? Parents, right? Most of you probably did. I know if I was sitting here, I'd be like, what an idiot. We don't know how to behave. But the fact of the matter is that with basic rules and an agreement to some very basic rules, meetings and organizations run smoother. And it's a way for everyone involved to be aware of what's expected of them and what process is appropriate. So obviously within your individual meetings, you're going to have a different type of set of rules and a different type of set of procedures. But the point is you have to know what they are and you have to agree to them. So one of the things when we were asked to, possibly come in and do this presentation that I looked at was, what are your rules and what are your procedures? Because I wanted to try to familiarize myself with those. And what I realized was you might have overall governing rules for the overall Democratic Party, but some of your individual clubs don't seem to have governing rules, procedures, community agreements, etc. It depends on who's in the room and what's happening in the room. So one of the things we decided to focus on because of that was what those things can look like and how they can be of benefit. So points to consider with that are, if you have rules and procedures, are all of your members provided copies or access to what those rules and procedures are? And if you have them, does everyone actually know what to expect? Do you train on that? And it looks like with your agenda for the training today that there are various options for that, and that is phenomenal. And so if an organization doesn't have this in place, if you have a group or a club and you don't have governing documents, you don't have a community standard, you don't have agreements, then you run the risk of having a very small group of people that think that they know what the rules are, and then they have the ability to use those rules for their own benefit. Kind of the weaponization of an organization's rules. And that can derail any organization, no matter how large or how small. So it is crucial that that is avoided. And you do that by making sure that A, you have rules and procedures, and that they are reviewed and adopted regularly, and that you train on them. So the rules and procedures, kind of the overall thing that we're going to be looking at in terms of governing conflict. So just the kind of other overall agenda. That's kind of doesn't want to move. I don't like to move either. So overall agenda is frequently, don't be scared. Defining conflict, recognizing it, the different types. How do you manage and handle tools that you have to prevent, and then various types of resolving conflicts.
There we go. Perfect.
And that is kind of our overall agenda. I'm going to turn the rest over to Jerby for a bit. He's going to talk about what conflict is and can look like.
Hey, good morning. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about what is conflict. Everybody comes to the club meetings from different backgrounds and life experiences. But conflicts happen when we have a disagreement between people who have different values and opinions, needs and interests, and you're unable to come up with some kind of an agreement, right? And when we can't move beyond conflict, it hurts the organization, and you really must act. There we go. Right, and so we need to figure out how we can recognize conflict when it does arise as one of our tools in terms of solving these problems. And really, in terms of conflict, it can kind of come back down into three different categories, right? You have a goal conflict, right? We have let's say a club, and we can't decide what our goal is, and we can't figure out how to get beyond that. That could be a conflict. We have a judgment conflict, which is, hey, we agree on our goals, but we can't figure out how to get there, right? And then you have, of course, everybody probably recognizes this. You have personality conflicts that you potentially will have to deal with. But as I said, we are here as volunteers, and we're coming from all different life experiences. And so, how do we work that out? All right, we work that out by managing the conflict. And as leaders, what you really must do, you have to acknowledge conflict, you have to address it, and you have to act. And really what you need to do when you're working on those things, you have to understand the cause, the cause of the conflict and the relative facts. You need to ensure good communication between you and your members or whoever's having the conflict. When you're listening to problems, you need to listen objectively and actively. You need to be neutral and avoid getting into the us versus them kind of discussions that seem to happen quite often.
And so there are some, basic things with conflict. I think most of us are familiar with the negative outcomes from conflict. Obviously, you have frustration, which generally then turns into people don't want to work within your group, your club, your organization. They give up, they go somewhere else, etc. For the long-term success of an organization, if there is continual negative conflict, the problem that you face is that people don't trust you. They don't trust your organization. They don't trust the leadership. They don't trust the motivations of people that are involved. And that obviously creates a lack of teamwork, and it actually impacts the ability for your organization or club to be sustainable, let alone accomplish whatever mission or goals that you have set out. There are also some positive impacts or results of confrontation, right? Creative solutions, you move forward. Most of us get really comfortable with things and like to just continue in the way that we are aware of, that we're comfortable with. And until our way of doing something or our way of thinking about something is challenged, nothing changes. So if we're constantly trying to do things in the same way, and we're in conflict with those that perhaps have the same goals, ideas, and missions, but we don't like the way they want to do it, you run the risk of stifling voices and perhaps not accomplishing whatever your specific goals or missions are. So sometimes going through those discussions and kind of that conflict ultimately ends up being better. And with an all-volunteer organization, one of the things that we in general in PTA particularly deal with is what we call the weavas. That we've always done it that way. Right? We've always done it that way. Well, congratulations, that was 30 years ago. You've done some great things. There are now some new and other ways that maybe we can get that message out. It doesn't mean that the way you've done it in the past is wrong or doesn't work anymore, but we want to try something in addition to. Can we work together on that? Right? So taking that conflict and trying to bring it forward. So, and then when you have that, so now a little more specific about how you can handle conflict.
Yeah.
That's you then.
All right. So, everybody handles conflict in a different way, and just like so many things in life. And really, it's a great idea to get to know the board members and club members, not only on a working level, but a little bit of a personal level, because everybody is different. And, recognizing those differences is really key to avoiding or, getting through conflict. And so when you think about leadership, you can think of, and I know you guys talked a little bit about leadership stuff before, but when you're working with people, some people you can give them super basic instructions on something to do, and then they're good. They're just like, I'm fine. But then if you try to help them more, right, you're micromanaging them, and then they get mad about that, right? Other people, they need every single detail written out. And so if you treat that person like the person who's the, okay, I know what I'm doing and I'm going to go do it, then they don't know what to do and they need more guidance. So you have to kind of figure that out, and you have people that procrastinate, you have your overachievers, that everybody is different. And so as a leader in a volunteer group, we're working with so many different people, but you're all brought together by your commitment to the cause, right? You are here by choice because of your commitment to the cause. So you have to recognize that and then work with different work styles. Knowing some of the basics of the conflict management is going to help you kind of lead your club and your organization, or even just be a more effective board member. All right, so I think we're going to talk a little bit about some of the behaviors that inflame conflict. All right, we have a pretty good list here, but it is of course not complete. I feel like everybody maybe can recognize some of those behaviors that you've seen over the years. Yeah. The one I like is the one that seems to get kind of crazy these days, you know, emails and texts, right? That's a big one, right? Because you can think of you're writing an email one way and then somebody can take it another way, right? And when we're not talking to each other face to face, that can be a problem. If we're just talking to each other digitally, you can have some trouble. So anyway, I just kind of wanted everybody to kind of have a little eye on some of those things that inflame. And like I said, it's not an exhaustive list. There is so many more behaviors. And so, but there are also, great behaviors to help resolve conflict. And so you can read that list, but one I wanted to particularly highlight, and not everybody may know what this is, I want to talk a little bit about active listening. So as a leader, when we're trying to solve conflicts, one of the tools that you can use is active listening. So there are a couple of steps. You guys can Google this later if you want. It's nothing brand new, but it's a great way, I think, to get started in terms of conflict management. So the first thing, when you're actively listening, you need to make sure that you're paying attention. Like, I am focused, I am here, we are talking, I am not on my phone as well, right? You're focused on the moment. And you're operating at a space of respect for the other person. All right. And then when you're talking about things or listening, you're actively listening, you want to make sure you withhold judgment. So leave your judgment behind on this. We're just trying to figure out what's going on. And you need to be open to new ideas, kind of as Helen was talking about, get out of the Viva thing. And yeah, so suspend your judgment and hold your criticism off, and avoid the arguing or trying to make your point emphatically over somebody else. This is just we're just listening to what's going on. And then in that, you also want to make sure that you reflect on this. So you don't assume that you can understand correctly what somebody else is telling you. So back and forth reflection is a great way to indicate that you and your, the person that you're talking with are on the same page. And then so what you also want to do is ask questions and make sure that you clarify everything. So if somebody says, one thing, you can kind of repeat that back to them to make sure that you heard it correctly, so that everybody is understanding everybody. And then what you want to do is you want to kind of summarize things as you're discussing it to make, again, this is just to make sure that we have good communication between two people. And then what you're saying, this is how I hear it, and making sure that we are on the same page. And then what you're going to do is you want to make sure you can share about this, because it's really, like I said, active listening is about understanding the other person and then about being understood, right? So as you get a better understanding of the other person's perspective, then you can introduce your new ideas and feelings and suggestions. And you may want to, you may have a similar experience you had and share an idea that was triggered by a comment made previously in the conversation. That can work, but applying those 6 skills to active listening, it will allow you to be a good listener and then a better leader as well. Next one. I think it's nope. Helen.
So as Derby was saying that, and I'm going to go off script because that's what I do. One of the things that I was thinking of last night when we were reviewing that is that all of those things that Derby was just mentioning tend to be skills that we use in our personal life. It's how we handle our family members. It's how we handle our friends. It's how we handle the people that matter to us personally. But frequently we throw those skills out when we're within an organization and when we're trying to work with people that perhaps we don't really know well. So if you are experiencing that in whatever group that you're in, one of the problems that you may be facing is that you aren't acknowledging each other as individuals that are there for the same purpose. You might be viewing each other as competition, as opposed to maybe that uncle that you don't want to handle at Thanksgiving, but you're going to treat him really well because you know that he loves your family, even if you don't like the way he shows that. So sometimes you have to also reframe the way that you are looking at the people that you are working with within your organization. And that was just something that when I was reading through things and talking with one of my daughters who was on the spectrum last night, that struck me. That was her perspective. So we treat everyone like family, whether we like them or not, because she doesn't always like them. So that's kind of where that came from. So thank you, Natasha. Sorry.
Do you want me to move on?
Yeah, I will, I can do that. So back to what I was really kind of more prepared to talk about, aside from that comment. So the resolving conflict process. So obviously, as Derby, sorry, thank you, sir, was talking about is the active listening, which also means that people can hear you. So if you can't, remind me, I'll do a better job with the mic. What is the situation, the conflict, have it described, and then what do the parties, what do the individuals want? What is their motivation? What is their goal? And how can you bring that together in an appropriate manner? So again, it's that family Thanksgiving table kind of concept, is you create a culture of respect for individuals, regardless of what you think about them personally, and a respect for whatever your policies and procedures are. So you are there essentially, especially if you're a leader in the organization and people have come to you to help solve a problem, you are there to help facilitate a solution, not decide upon the solution. Okay, a leader, and particularly within a club and with an organization, helps to facilitate the solution, not determine what that solution is. Because your organization, the individuals involved, are only going to succeed, you're only going to have buy-in if they feel like they were heard, acknowledged, listened to, and if they feel like whatever resolution is agreed upon, considered where they were seated at that table. And then you need to carry out whatever the solution to the problem is or was, and you need to do that immediately. And if you do happen to have governing documents, bylaws, policies, procedures, community standards, whatever, and there's something about the particular conflict that you've just experienced, if there's something about the solution that you've come to that is new and different from the traditions within the organization or from what was believed to be the interpretation of those, you have to update those rules, policies, and procedures and go through your process for that, so that it isn't something that you're doing every meeting or every year, if that makes sense. Does that, as a process, does that make sense? Updating things after you've dealt with something? Okay. And then the different ways of handling conflict. So I will say that when I was younger, I didn't understand the avoiding aspect of ways of handling conflict, because in my head, when I saw something like that, oh, avoiding conflict is just pretending that it doesn't exist. It's kind of that, you know, ostrich concept. What I didn't recognize, and what I recognize now, and I value now, and I try to force myself in many situations to practice, is the timeout concept. So avoiding isn't that you're never going to deal with it. Avoiding is you're not going to deal with it in the moment. You're not going to deal with it when you're mad, when people are yelling at you, when you don't have all the information, and when maybe you don't even have the authority to act, right? So avoiding is different from pretending that it doesn't exist. Kind of hit and stop, stepping back and giving yourself time to work on something. It's not sending the email, it's not sending the text, the basic advice I like to give to any of kind of our new unit leaders, in particular our presidents that get hit with all kinds of nonsense on a daily basis, is in a Word document, write a resignation letter. Get it all out, everything you hate, everything that's bothering you, everything that you don't think you can handle, and all the people that you wish would just get out of your face and go away. And we all have those people. I am that person for many people. And that's fine. Write it in a Word doc. Don't put it in an email, don't send it. The act of just getting that out, save it in a folder, go back and review it in a month. If you still have the same feelings and issues, then there's a problem that you need to address. Does that make sense? Give yourself that time to reflect as well. And as part of that, take a look at the culture that you're with and the culture that you're creating. Because if you are in a meeting and you're leading a meeting and you're trying to help people, but your basic reaction to some of those people is, oh my God, I can't stand you, I want you to go away, then you need to address that within yourself, because that's what you're giving off. And that's conflict. Okay. And so it's not avoiding by denying, it's the timeout and the pause, right? We know what competing is. I want my idea only. Or my ideas are the best ideas. I have the best people. Collaborating, we can do all this together, right? That's our goal. So exactly. Derby's reminding me because I go off script and he's very good at keeping me in line, which is a really sad job for him. But the important part of that is that different conflicts are going to involve varying levels of that. It can all blend together. Different ways of handling things are going to blend various styles and require different types of actions and different types of ways of dealing with that. So it's not always going to be a competition. It's not always going to require a compromise, but it may always require a 24-hour pulling off period or that avoiding. It might always need a timeout just because. So I'm sorry. And then one of the most important aspects that I think we keep kind of trying to touch on within conflict management is have a process. You should have a process. Hopefully you do have a process. And that process is established. And if anything breaks down at any point, stop, go back, go through that process again. When you have that, it gives you a framework. It allows you to avoid the passions and issues that frequently come up. So the process, as it's designed, and hopefully as yours are designed, should be neutral. You should have clear ground rules. And then when you're dealing with people individually, focus on being respectful. And again, as Derby went over, that active listening. And please do not rehash. Well, 3 years ago, we thought we handled this, and okay, but we dealt with that. And now we're, so those things are kind of important to acknowledge. And if you do not have a process, if you do not have procedures within your club, your individual organization that specifically line out, spell out what your process is, what you expect from your members, what you expect from your volunteers, create one together, not just one or two, handing it down, create one so that you have that framework. Some of the ones that we use no pictures came up, that may be better. So some of the ones that we specifically use in PTA that we kind of really go to almost on a daily basis when we're dealing things. We have our bylaws and our standing rules. And I know that overall the Democratic Party has that here because I read through that in preparing for this and then realized that may not apply specifically individually to clubs. So I stepped back and tried to do something different. And then Robert's Rules of Order. And I see that you have parliamentary procedure in your training coming up. That when you're first starting out, and for those of you that are not super familiar, you think it's the most boring thing. And then the moment you have a problem in a meeting, you're like, oh my God, we need Robert's rules and who here understands them and how do I do that? It is a brilliant, brilliant tool for managing the way meetings go. And I'm super excited to see that you have that. And I would actually expect that from this kind of organization to really focus on that. And so for those of you that are not familiar, I hope you take advantage of that training. And if you have the ability, bring it back to your smaller groups and those that aren't here so that everyone understands. Because meetings can be challenging when only 3 people understand Robert's rules, because the people that don't feel like they're shut out. So help them, train them. Robert's rules, absolutely your friend. For some, there are going to be professional governance standards that apply. For some of you that are involved more in the financial side, you're going to have different types of rules, different types of regulations that apply that perhaps some other clubs don't have to worry about. So just depends on the overall nature of your group. The most important is the transparent grievance process. So if you have a problem, if you have a conflict and it cannot be resolved through basic discussion, meeting, coming together, you need a formal process for people to complain and have their concerns heard and addressed. It needs to be spelled out. They need to know how to access it. And they need to know how that's going to be handled. If you have a grievance committee, if some of y'all are large enough to have a grievance committee and have access to something like that, it's also important that that grievance committee work in a timely manner and that the findings of the grievance committee are something that are shared in a timely manner. Doesn't mean the discussions, the process has to be put forward, but the findings need to be. If you don't have a formal grievance process, work with some people to establish one. That makes sense? How many of you have a grievance process? How many of you need a grievance process? Okay, it's a big one and it's important. And I know I'm off script yet again. So it's an important one.
There you go.
There you go.
That's that one.
That's it.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're up. It's not going.
Not that one.
Is it not advancing? The system says we're done.
Oh, I get it. I know what it's doing.
Oh, now it's
There we
putting
go.
up pictures. Okay.
There we go. Okay. So not to, I mean, just, it's kind of the theme of this little presentation. As Helen was talking about, procedures and bylaws and all that kind of stuff, making sure that your members know that they exist and that you review them regularly is hugely important, right? Because we want to make sure we know about these things, not in the heat of battle when we're having a conflict, because using the bylaws as a weapon and things like that. But it's your first meeting of the year, you can review our standards of our meeting standards or review Robert's Rules of Order. And it may seem like a huge amount of rule, really nitpicky, but it's really to ensure fairness and inclusion so that everybody can participate in your club. And it's not just a couple of people with really loud voices that are just going to run the show. Okay, so it really tries to bring in a sense of fairness into the meetings, right? Because when we're going to meetings as volunteers, right, we're going to go if our club, our meeting, we are behind the cause and we're doing things and it's a positive group. But if it's not that way, we don't have to come back next week. And so if we're trying to build up our membership, we want to make sure that we have really great meetings and we do really great things for the cause. So yeah, I kind of shot over handling difficult people, but as we're talking about conflict, you're gonna have difficult people in your clubs. Like I said, we're coming from all different kinds of backgrounds. When you're dealing with conflict, yeah. Do
you want me to go back?
Right one? Yeah, go back.
Okay. Sorry. I'm
just a couple of key tools when we're talking about people who are angry or agitated, and they're, being difficult, you want to make sure you have a couple of clear questions that you can ask them. First off, you want to make sure that you're calm and you project positivity. But we also okay, I understand you're upset. So what would you like me to do? Right? There's one. And then the other one is, how would you like to see this resolved? Right? So that, if somebody's just complaining because they want to complain, well, there you go. So that's a good way, you're speaking in person, is my advice on this, not through an email, not through a text, in person, not in front of other people. We don't want to have, I don't want to sit there and call Frida out in the middle of a big meeting because something's going on. Talk to them separately. But yeah, okay, so what do we want to do? What do you want to see out of this? And what can we do to resolve it? Kind of get that conversation started. And really, when you're handling disagreements, you want to try and make sure that you focus on the problem and not the individual. I mean, it can be a challenge, but if you keep in mind, the mission statement of the organization or the club, that can help guide your actions. And again, like I said, in person, it's so much harder to be mad, for us to be mad at each other when we're talking to each other. Well, of course, I'm pointing at this. But if we're talking to each other like this, it's way harder to be mean than writing up a big text and firing it off in anger, right? So I suggest the personal interaction is hugely important. All right. You're one ahead.
Am I
Be
still
quick though.
one ahead? I'm sorry.
All right. So as we're doing this work, there will be conflict that comes up. But what you need to do, you need to make sure that you're aware of your leadership style. I think I heard some talk about leadership style in the first presentation. Like I said, you want to make sure you stay positive and you have a can-do attitude. I want to make sure that you need to understand a couple of things in terms of building a strong team. You want to make sure that you can empower people. You want to make sure that you set expectations early and that you praise the success of the organization and the individuals. That's really going to help with a lot of conflict right there. And then, again, I keep saying this, you want to make sure that you promote and practice open communications. That is so key to this. And so hopefully now you've got some skills. I don't know, is that an acronym or whatever for that? So you've got some skills, you know how you've got to stay calm, keep it respectful, identify the problem, listen, look for solutions, and set ground rules and use your tools and procedures.
Anyone? Yeah, we have a few minutes, and so does anyone have any questions? Ma'am?
So, no, you had a slide that kind of went away about resources, and I was particularly wondering about resources in terms of the grievance process.
Specific written out grievance process?
Yeah, and what would you, so that you can develop your own, but is there something already existing that resources?
That template right there in the top corner.
So, that template in the top corner there those are our bylaws for, PTA.
Right.
There is reference to the grievance process. There is a committee, and it tells you who can be on the grievance process committee, etc. But in our particular organization, it is spelled out more in what we call our toolkit, because those are things that the organization itself has designed to meet our needs. If you are comfortable doing some web research, to Google grievance process, you will find varying examples of those. They tend to be organization specific, and they can also focus a lot on the type of community that you're dealing with. So you're going to have a different type of grievance process within the medical community, and that you're going to have a different one within PTA, So in terms of a basic template, I don't have that. I can tell you that the way things are, the way things are aligned, it's something that you can spell out within the bylaws that I saw for the overall Democratic Party that I was looking through in preparing for this. There did seem to be mention of some specific rules and procedures that I believe if you're within a club or a group that's under that, apply to you. So that is something that you should talk specifically to the leadership here about, is what's appropriate for you and can they help you establish that? Does that make sense?
In the back,
Did that answer your
Yes,
question?
thank you, that helps.
in the way
I-
back,
you know, I just-
way back.
Wait, okay, so I'm gonna let you, because I can't, I have my reading glasses on, and so I just see a lady with her hand up, so
Yeah, in the peach sweater.
there we go.
Hi, thank you all for the chat today. I have a question on the PTA component. Is it an overall governing body that you all are utilizing to facilitate the ground rules, foundational principles and things?
Yeah, so the question was if everybody was that about kind of PTA as an organization. So, yeah, it is a national organization, I mean, kind of like you guys too. We have national PTA, there's California State PTA, and then there are district PTAs, which are kind of like broken into the counties in California. And then we have councils that are kind of aligned with school districts, and then the basic units in all of our schools. And so, yeah, we all operate under the big umbrella of the national PTA. And, but like, I think, I'm not sure about the grievance procedure from the national PTA, if we want to use that for an example. But like the California State PTA has established one. And so, our members in our school units, like if there's a grievance that even at that level, there is a process that they can look up to follow through to see if they can get that conflict managed. Did that kind of answer what you're talking about?
So though it is so at the party versus us trying to individualize this government, does it make sense for us to establish our own board of trustees or committees so that we establish the ground rules at California, San Diego? What do you recommend for us to facilitate something at that level so that it's created for all of us as a whole and we operate no matter which party you belong to, if you move from county to county, district to district, and it's the same for everybody across the board?
Well, pardon?
Okay.
So, yeah, so I mean, just from my perspective of not really knowing anything that's, the details of the organization and all that, I would say that, yeah, like it would be better handled with like a higher up kind of creating, as we were talking about, kind of some templates and some general guidelines that then can be employed by, the clubs, and used by them as well. And so, Katie, did you have something for this?
Yeah, I
Okay.
was gonna try and maybe give some hint. I served on the ethics committee for several years, and we used policies and procedures of the county party as our guiding principle. But there's a whole process that you can see online about how the ethics committee uses, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
So yeah, the ethics committee has a whole process by which they do deal with grievances in the party. And so if you go to the party website, you can actually look up what the processes are on that and kind of use it as a template for each individual club throughout, just so we're all kind of in agreement. I think that's probably the best possible template for our club to have.
All right, I think you guys have another panel coming up in a second. We get one more question. So how about, I saw your hand up first.
Thanks. So you talked a lot about personal conflict, but also competing goals can be a conflict just organizationally. Do you have any advice on how to handle that? If, you want to say, what are our top 3 goals for this year? And there's 18 ideas. What's the best way to manage that?
He's like, do you want to handle
Oh,
this?
no, you
I mean,
Are you in conflict?
so, yeah, no, we're good. I can follow him anywhere. Like, he's had to deal with me for a few years. And I am not always, the person you want, because I can not, I've learned, I've matured, I've grown into this, because when you're talking about, establishing goals, establishing priorities, do you already have a process for that? Who helps you determine that? Do you take that input from all of your members? Do you rank them? Do you discuss how they can come together? Are there some goals that can actually merge so that instead of three, it's really one overriding issue? Do you already have a process for that? And then when you're determining, are you just voting on that as an organization and whoever, whichever ones get the top votes become the issue? Do you have a process for that already? No. Okay, so then that's kind of the place that you started. How are we going to determine that? Right, so you create a process around that. You can talk to some of the other clubs and organizations that you believe within your overall group that are successful. How do they do it? Reach out.
And really dedicating like set amount of time to just talk about let's say your organizational goal. That is key, right? So you're like, okay, we're gonna meet on Tuesday, for an hour, we're gonna talk about organizational goals. And, that could start off with some brainstorming, and yeah, you may have 18 different things, but yeah, no organization is ever gonna be able to get all that accomplished. And you got to think about timelines and things like that. So I think dedicating specific time and then kind of sticking, maybe we do it every year. So you're not stuck with that the whole time and things do change, but you have established something. So it's not like, Helen comes in and she's like, oh my God, we have to go do this and we have to do that. And you're like, well, you're already kind of locked into these other things. And then, maybe we can take that on next year, or if it's important enough, maybe we have a meeting to specifically look at that. But try and keep everybody kind of in the right direction. Can be a little bit of a challenge, but yes, spending dedicated time on developing those goals.
So just, as a brief closing, when you're in an organization and when you are working and relying upon volunteers, in particular, if you are a leader of that organization, it is really important for you to honor the fact that you have people that are giving you their time for free. They're leaving their families, they're leaving, their professional time, their personal time to come in and see and hopefully work with you towards some shared goals and some shared vision. It's important that you respect that of them. And it's important that you create meetings and you create an environment that does foster that positive, inclusive environment that people are going to want to join and that they're going to want to work within. And again, you do that by ensuring that you have rules and procedures that everyone understands, that you allow for the ability to have conflict, discussion, positive, negative, and that you provide a clear, transparent, written process for handling disagreements or grievances. And if all else fails, we've already said it several times, ask others for help. What is their process? What works for them? What can you mirror? So thank you for giving us the opportunity for this today. I hope it was useful. I appreciate the fact that we're in a room of volunteers that are here on a Saturday. I know that that's not always the easiest, but thank you all for being here, and I hope you found this useful. Thank you.